The airlock hissed open, and Mira Vasquez was the last one through it, the way she always was. Not because she was slow, because she was the only one who looked back. Behind the Cass Meridian, the planet hung in the viewport, like a bruise healing into something beautiful. Violet cloud bands dissolving into amber coastlines, a single vast ocean, the color of old copper, and across the northern hemisphere, something that looked from orbit like fur, dense and dark and moving, though nothing that size could be moving. She stood in the airlock threshold for 4 seconds longer than the safety protocol allowed and watched it. Then the door sealed behind her, and the descent pod shuddered and dropped, and the planet came up to meet them faster than it had any right to. Commander Theo Halls called it Resource Survey 7. The company designation was RV0041G. The crew called it the Green One, because from orbit, the landmasses looked carpeted, even the poles. The ecological survey drone had gone down 4 days ago and come back with a catalog of life signatures that made the xenobiology station on Kepler-2 look like a parking lot. Thousands of species, maybe more. The drone footage showed things that moved like deer through forests of crystalline stalks, creatures that swam in the copper sea in slow spiral formations, birds, or something structured like birds, that traveled in formations so precise they looked designed. The survey report, technically, called for a 6-week observation period before any ground team contact. Theo Halls had laughed when Mira read that aloud. She was the mission's xenoecologist. She had a degree from the University of Porto and a second specialization in contact protocols from the Interstellar Biodiversity Institute, which was a very important credential that no one on this crew cared about even slightly. The other 7 people in the descent pod were hunters, not militarily. Professionally, really, most of them were corporate executives or wealthy contractors who had paid considerable sums to the Cascade Acquisitions and Survey Service for what the brochure called the most exclusive trophy experience in the explored galaxy. The brochure had a picture of a man standing over something enormous and alien, with one boot on its neck. The man was grinning. Mira had not seen the brochure before she signed on. She had thought the job was field ecology. In a sense, it still was. Halls was in the seat directly in front of her, already doing the thing he did before every landing. Field stripping his plasma rifle and reassembling it with the habitual ease of a man who found the process meditative. He was 53 years old, with gray at his temples, and a face that had been handsome once, and was now just commanding. He ran 3 regional logistics companies in the Kepler corridor and had led 14 Cass expeditions before this one. On his mantle at home, Mira had been told, because people talked freely in front of her, as if she were furniture, he had the mounted heads of species from 6 different worlds. None of them were dangerous. Several of them had been, according to the xenobiological record, the last known specimens of their kind. She had thought about that a great deal during the 3-week transit to RV0041G. Beside Halls sat Mark Ewan, the youngest of the group at 38, who worked in resource extraction and laughed too loudly, and had spent most of the transit playing cards and making jokes Mira didn't find funny. He had what he called a lucky rifle, a modified pulse weapon with the Cass logo engraved on the barrel, and he polished it every morning the way some men prayed. Across the aisle, the Brandt brothers, Emil and Otto, sat in identical postures with identical equipment, quiet men who communicated mostly in half sentences, and who had, between them, participated in 23 survey expeditions. Then came Prakash Ree, a data architect whose money came from something in telecommunications, and Samir Vol, a heavy-set former military contractor who Mira suspected had more field experience than he let on. Last was Dean Carrick, who was 60 years old and said almost nothing, ever, and whose eyes moved constantly, cataloging everything, missing nothing. 8 humans in a descent pod, dropping toward a world that had no name. Mira watched them. It was what she did. The pod hit atmosphere, and the windows went red, and she gripped her harness and thought, not for the first time, I should have read the brochure. They landed in a clearing that the drone had identified as suitable. Flat ground, good sight lines, near a water source. The clearing was ringed by the crystalline stalks she had seen from orbit, each one a meter or more in diameter, and rising 15, 20 meters into the air. Their upper structures branching into lattice formations that caught the amber light and fractured it into soft prismatic fans across the forest floor. The ground itself was covered in something between moss and fir, a growth, dark green-black, that yielded slightly underfoot and seemed, Mira thought, to breathe. Not literally, not in any way she could measure, but there was a quality to it, a subtle rise and fall, that made her walk carefully. The others walked like they owned it. Halls was out of the pod before the ramp had fully extended, rifle up, sweeping the tree line with a practiced eye. He was smiling. She had noticed he smiled like this on approach. That anticipatory lightness, like a man about to open a gift he had already decided to love. Beautiful, he said, and he meant it, and that was the part Mira found most difficult. He did love it. All of them did, in their way. They were not cruel, men in the way cruelty is usually understood. They did not take pleasure in suffering. They took pleasure in the hunt, in the landscape, in the coffee brewed on a camp burner, at dawn on an alien world, in the company of other men who understood this particular joy. It was just that the joy required killing, and they had never found a reason why that should be a problem. Primary fauna signatures are 2 kilometers northeast, she said, because it was her job to say it. She had her scanner up, cycling through the drone's mapping data. The survey flagged something in the large mammal equivalent category. Multiple specimens, high density. But Commander, the protocol noted. Hulse didn't look at her. He was already moving toward the tree line. She followed. She always followed. The forest closed around them like a cathedral. The crystalline stalks rising overhead. The lattice canopy diffusing the light into something gentle and diffuse. The soft, moss-fur ground muffling their footsteps. Things moved in the middle distances. She could see them. Shapes that resolved slowly as they approached into creatures that looked like deer-built by someone who had heard deer described but never seen one. 4-limbed, with long curved necks and eyes set wide in amber, and flanks that shimmered with a bioluminescent pattern that pulsed in slow waves from neck to hip. They moved in small groups, unhurried, browsing on the crystalline undergrowth. They were, objectively, one of the most beautiful things Mira had ever seen. Marcus Ewan shot the first one from 80 meters. He did it almost as an afterthought, barely pausing, barely raising the rifle to his cheek, the pulse shot crossing the distance, in a flat crack that shattered the cathedral quiet. The creature folded. Its companion scattered, moving with a liquid speed that was more water than land animal, vanishing into the deep forest. Marcus walked to where it had fallen and nudged it with his boot. Clean, he said, satisfied. Mira was writing in her field recorder. Species designation unknown, large herbivore equivalent, bilateral symmetry, bioluminescent patterning, apparent herd behavior. Killed 00. 47 hours after first surface contact. She kept her face very still. Then she saw it. She almost missed it. It was a shimmer in the air above the dead creature. A heat shimmer quality, almost like a mirage, except that the temperature was mild, and there was no sun in the direct sense to generate one. It lasted perhaps 2 seconds, rising from the body like exhalation. And then it was gone. And where Marcus Ewan had been standing, directly in the shimmer's path, there was a new quality to the air, a brief superimposition, like a double exposure. A ghost of the creature's shape laid briefly over his. He didn't notice. He was already moving, following Halls deeper into the trees. Mira stood still for a long moment, with her recorder running, and looked at the dead creature, and the empty air above it, and thought, I need to understand what that was before anyone else fires. She did not get that long. Over the next 4 hours, the group killed 11 more creatures. Halls took 2 of the deer equivalents, with careful, precise shots. He was a good marksman, methodical, selecting his targets with the patience of someone who genuinely understood fieldcraft. The Brandt brothers moved in tandem through the undergrowth, and flushed something larger from a riverbank. A creature that moved on 6 legs with a rolling, powerful gait, its hide a deep blue-black with bony ridges along its spine, its head small and narrow and carrying what looked like compound eyes. Otto shot it twice. Emil put a 3rd shot into it when it kept moving. It lay at the river's edge in the shallow water, and the copper current moved slowly around it. Mira watched the shimmer each time. It rose from each body. It moved in the direction of whoever had fired. And each time, for a fraction of a second, the hunter wore something. A ghost over, a phantom double exposure of the creature they had killed, wrapped briefly around them, like a cloak made of light. Each time it faded before they could see it. Each time they were already moving on. She recorded everything. She cross-referenced. She built a working hypothesis in her field notes that she knew she could not present to Hals without the kind of evidence that would survive his skepticism, which was considerable. She wrote, "Possible energetic transfer event at moment of death. Possible quantum resonance effect in local biology. Possible," and here she paused and wrote this carefully, "consequent structure built into planetary ecosystem. If so, the killers may not realize they are participants in something they did not choose to enter." She put her recorder in her jacket pocket and ran to catch up with the group. "Hals," she said, pulling up beside him on a ridge overlooking a valley, where a herd of something enormous moved in slow procession far below. "I need you to stop for a moment." He glanced at her with the benign patience of a man who was used to this kind of interruption. "What have you got?" "I've been observing a phenomenon that occurs at the moment of each kill. There's an energetic discharge of some kind. It rises from the body and contacts whoever fired. I think it may be a mechanism, something built into the local ecology. I think this place may have." "Mira." His voice was not unkind. That was the thing about Hals. He was never unkind. "We're in the field. You're the ecologist. You're doing your job. I'm not dismissing what you're saying. Document it. We'll review your notes tonight. Right now I need you to be safe and stay behind the line." He turned back to the valley. "Beautiful formation down there. Emil, do you see that flank on the left?" She stood on the ridge and watched them, and the shimmer moved over Hals's shoulders for a moment, just a moment. And she saw it clearly, the ghost of the last creature he had killed superimposed over him. Its eyes looking out from behind his eyes, its form wrapped around his like a skin he didn't know he was wearing. She almost said, "Commander, look at your hands." She didn't. She knew what would happen if she did. They camped that night at the pod. The mood was expansive, satisfied, the easy pleasures of men who had done what they came to do, and done it well. Yoon was cooking something from the expedition rations and telling a story about a previous Cass expedition with enormous animation. The Brandt brothers were cataloging their shots on a shared data tablet. Ree had fallen asleep in his camp chair, with his boots still on. Vol was cleaning his rifle and not talking, the way Vol always was. Hals sat across from Mira at the camp table and looked at her field notes with genuine attention. This was, she thought, what made him harder to hate than he should have been. He actually read everything she gave him. He was not a stupid man. He was not a careless man even. He was a man whose framework for the world had never been seriously challenged, and who therefore had no mechanism for recognizing a challenge when it arrived. "This shimmer you're describing," he said, "it's not in the drone footage. The drone footage was taken at high altitude. The effect is subtle. You'd need to be present. You think the planet is doing something. I think the ecosystem has a response mechanism that activates at the moment of death. I've recorded 12 incidents that follow the same pattern. The energetic discharge appears to contact the individual responsible for the death. I don't yet know what the contact does." He was quiet for a moment, reading. She watched his face. He was actually considering it. "In the morning," he said, "I'd like you to get closer samples. If there's an effect, I want to understand it before we go further into the interior. There's a migration route." The drone flagged 40 kilometers north. "Something very large moving through the canyon system. If we're going to reach it in time, we need to leave at first light." He handed back the recorder. Document everything you find. I mean that. I understand. Good. He poured himself coffee from the camp burner and offered her the same, and she took it because it was cold, and the gesture was genuine. You're good at this, you know, the noticing. Most ecologists I've had on survey, they write down what they're told to write down. You actually look. She held the cup in both hands and looked at him, at the faint shimmer that still clung to him, a ghost haze she could see now, without any effort. The creature shape wrapped around him like a coat he didn't know he'd put on. I know, she said. She didn't sleep. She went back into the forest in the 4 a.m. dark, alone, with her scanner and her recorder and a small light that she kept low. And she found the clearing where the first creature had been killed. The body was still there. Nothing had come for it in the night, which was interesting. In any functioning ecosystem, a body this size would have attracted scavengers within hours. The ground around it was undisturbed. She crouched beside it and scanned. The scanner returned data that made no sense in any framework she had. The creature's cellular structure was intact, not decomposing, not degrading. The energetic signature was complex in a way that suggested ongoing biological process, except the creature was dead. There was no heartbeat. There was no respiratory motion. But there was something happening at the cellular level that her scanner flagged as metabolic activity, non-standard, which was the instrument's way of saying, I don't know what this is. She sat back on her heels and thought. She thought about the shimmer. She thought about the overlay she'd seen on Hals's face. She thought about the creature that had died here, and about the way the shimmer had moved from the body toward Marcus Ewan, and about Ewan's face in the firelight last night. Laughing at something, his eyes bright and quick, and entirely his own. She was a xenoecologist. She understood ecosystems. She understood that every system has a logic, and that the logic is usually elegant, and that if you watch long enough the elegance reveals itself. She looked at the dead creature, and she thought, what if you're not gone? What if gone is not what this planet does? She walked back to camp in the gray pre-dawn, writing in her recorder with a steady hand, and what she wrote was a hypothesis she couldn't yet prove, but that she felt with the certainty of someone who has spent her entire adult life learning to read what other people walk past without seeing. She wrote it in precise, careful language, the language of science, because that was the only language Hals would hear. And she thought, I need to show him proof before the canyon. I need him to see it. She did not get the chance. At first light, Marcus Ewan didn't wake up. He was lying in his sleep bag in the perfect, motionless way of someone in deep rest, except that when Emil Brandt tried to rouse him for the morning debrief, something was wrong. Not medically wrong. His vitals were normal. His breathing was normal. His eyes were open. It was a quality of presence. When he sat up and looked around the camp, his eyes moved in a way that was not Marcus Ewan's way. Ewan's eyes always moved quickly, acquisitively, taking inventory of advantage. These eyes moved slowly, sweeping in wide arcs, stopping on the tree line, on the sky, on the copper flash of the distant water. When Carrick handed him coffee, he held the cup in both hands and looked at it with an expression of complete incomprehension, as if he had never encountered the concept before. Hals watched this for 4 minutes before he called Mira over. What's wrong with him? He asked quietly, so Ewan couldn't hear. She looked at Ewan, sitting in his camp chair, his coffee going cold, his gaze drifting toward the crystal forest with an unfocused longing that made him look like nothing, so much as a creature that had been taken out of its natural habitat and was listening for sounds of home. Do you remember what I told you last night? She said, about the shimmer. Hals looked at her. Theo. She never used his first name. He registered it. The creature Marcus shot yesterday morning. The deer equivalent. He was the first to fire. He was directly in the discharge path. I need you to think about what I told you. The silence lasted long enough that she could hear the crystal stalks chiming softly in the dawn wind. That's not possible, Hals said. I know. You're saying. I'm saying the planet has a law. Kill something and you become it. Marcus was the first to fire. and he was the most directly in the transfer path. Whatever happened, it happened more completely for him than for any of the rest of you. She kept her voice level. Commander, the rest of you have been exposed to partial transfers. Every time someone fires, the discharge contacts them. It's cumulative. I've been watching it happen since we landed. He turned and looked at his crew. At the Brandt brothers, comparing their catalog of shots. At Ree drinking coffee. At Vol, already loading his rifle for the day. Stop them, Mira said. Right now, today, before anyone fires again, let me do a full scan of every member of the team. Let me show you what I'm seeing. Then we decide together what to do next. He looked at her for a long time. She could see the shimmer on him. Stronger now than the previous evening, the creature shape pressing at the surface of him, impatient. His eyes were his, still entirely his, but around the edges, she could see the doubling, the soft overlay, like a photo printed on tracing paper and laid over a portrait. We have 12,000 credits of expedition booked, he said. I have 6 men who came here for a specific purpose. I understand that. If this is what you say it is, you have a containment solution, a counter protocol? I don't yet. But I need time to develop one, and I cannot develop it while your crew is actively exposing themselves to more transfers. He breathed out through his nose. Looked at the forest. At the morning light. 4 hours, he said. I'll give you 4 hours to get scans and show me something concrete. Then we assess together. If your data supports what you're saying, we stand down. If it doesn't, it will. 4 hours, Mira. She got 3. At the 90-minute mark, Prakash Ree went into the forest alone. She didn't know he'd gone until she heard the shot. A single pulse report, flat and clean, from 200 meters northeast. She was mid-scan on Emil Brandt, who had been cooperative in the suspicious way of a man who doesn't believe you, but is humoring you. And she stopped and looked in the direction of the sound and said, Who authorized? Halls was already on his feet. He tried to reach Ree on the comm. Got nothing for 30 seconds. Then static. And then a voice that used Ree's cadences and his vocabulary, but layered them over a quality of something else. A slowness, a depth, a register that belonged to a creature that processed the world in ways Ree's body wasn't built for. Ree, Hall said into the comm, very carefully. Report your status. What came back was Ree's voice saying words that were almost correct. Complete sentences, accurate descriptions of his surroundings. But the sentences were assembled in the order an animal might assemble them. If the animal had learned language recently and was still working out which parts were load-bearing, he described the forest the way something born in it would. The smell first, then the texture of the ground, then the sound, then finally, almost as an afterthought, the visual. He described the thing he had killed as the shape that ran. He did not give the shot distance, or the hit placement, or any of the professional assessment markers that Ree would have automatically included. By the time they reached him, the transformation wasn't partial anymore. He was sitting against one of the crystalline stalks, with his rifle in his lap, and his eyes wide open, and his face entirely vacant of the particular quality that had been Ree. Something else was there instead. Something that looked out at them from behind his features with a patient, wide curiosity that had no analog in human expression. It was not frightened. It was not confused. This was the only word Mira had for it, present. More present than Ree had ever been. More present than she had ever seen a person be. He looked at her and she felt, suddenly, that he saw her very clearly. Hall said, Can you hear me? Do you know who I am? Ree's face turned toward him. The eyes tracked. After a moment, the mouth opened. Yes, it said. You smell like the hunters. The Brandt brothers had their rifles up before Mira could say anything. She stepped between them and Ree, arms out, and the look on Otto's face was not cruelty. It was fear, clean and animal and immediate, the fear of a man who has just understood that the rules have changed and hasn't yet worked out which direction the danger is coming from. Lower them, she said. He's not dangerous. He's not a threat. It's complicated, but he cannot hurt you. And if you fire, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Emil looked at his brother. Otto looked at Hulse. Hulse made a short, flat gesture and the rifles came down. Mira crouched in front of Ree. "Can you understand me?" she asked. The eyes focused. Something moved behind them, a calculation, or the alien equivalent. Then, the small one that asked questions. "Yes, that's me. Do you know what's happened to you?" A long pause. "Then I know what I am now. What are you now?" "Slow," it said. "Deep patient." A pause. The other one was fast, quick thing. "Kill quick." "I was not like that." Another pause, longer. "I am learning to be slow." Is the other one, the person who was here before, is he still inside? The eyes shifted. Went somewhere internal. The lips pressed together with what looked, improbably, like effort. Then Ree's voice came back. Really came back. The cadence is correct. The register precise. For exactly 4 words. "Mira, don't let them." And then it was gone again, replaced by the patient depth, and the face settled back into its wide, absorptive attention. She stood up. She turned to Hulse. She did not say, "I told you." She did not need to. His face had done the work. "Tell them," she said. "Tell everyone right now. No one fires. No one leaves camp without me. Every round of ammunition goes into secured storage tonight. If you do not do this, every member of this crew will be sitting in that forest by morning wearing a face they won't recognize." Hulse was looking at Ree. Something had happened to his command expression. The competence was still there, but it was sitting over a different substrate now. Something rawer. "What do we do for him?" he said. "I don't know yet. I need time with the scanner, and I need your crew to stop adding to the problem. Those are the only 2 things I need right now." "Do it," he said. And then to his crew, in the flat voice of a man issuing an order he doesn't expect to be questioned. "Weapons secured. No one leaves the pod perimeter without Vasquez." The Brandt brothers looked at each other. "Now," Hall said. They secured the weapons. Mira worked through the afternoon with the scanner and her field recorder, and the low amber light filtering through the crystal lattice overhead. She worked with the systematic focus of someone who has been trained for exactly this. For the moment when the data stops being what you expected and starts being what is, and she mapped what she could. The scanner gave her pieces. The energetic residue on every member of the crew, layered in like sediment, each accumulated kill leaving its trace. Hall's had the most complex signature. 7 distinct creature forms overlaid on his base biology, each one partially integrated, each one pressing against the surface. The Brandt brothers had 4 each. Vol had 2. Carrick, who had fired only once, at distance, had the thinnest overlay of all. She thought about what Ree had said. "I know what I am now." She thought about what his real voice had said for those 4 words. "Don't let them." She thought about the planet. She thought about ecosystems, about the logic of them, the elegant, ruthless mathematics of systems that have been optimizing for millions of years. An ecosystem does not punish. Ecosystems don't have opinions, but they do have consequences. They have cause and effect structures that operate whether or not any participant understands them. A lion kills a gazelle and becomes better at killing gazelles. A hunter kills a deer and becomes the deer. Not as punishment, as information. The planet was not angry. The planet was not moral. The planet was a system with a feedback loop, and the feedback loop said, "You want to know what you killed? Here, be it. Know it from inside." And the loop ran because something in the planet's evolutionary history had made that the most stable long-term solution to the problem of predation, a mechanism that eventually, inevitably, forced the predator to understand what they were doing from the inside. She wrote this in her recorder. Then she wrote, "This means the transfer is not permanent. If the mechanism is a feedback loop, and the purpose of feedback is correction, then the information must eventually be transmissible back." Ree's voice breaking through for 4 words proved that the original person was not erased, only temporarily overwritten. The question is what the mechanism accepts as evidence of learning. She looked up at the sky through the crystal lattice. Understanding, she thought. That's what it wants. Not just to feel it from inside, to understand what you did. The hard part was getting 5 people to actually understand. Night came with the amber sky, deepening to a purple black that was nothing like Earth's night sky. Richer, more layered, with 3 moons low on the horizon that Mira had not named because naming felt presumptuous. She sat with Ree, or the thing in Ree's body that was managing Ree, and talked to it. She was not sure how much of it got through. She asked questions and listened to the answers with all the skill she had, building a picture of what the planet's creatures were, how they lived, what they valued, what they feared. The answers were not human answers. They came in sensation and spatial relationships and things she had to translate 3 times in her head before they were even close to communicable. But they were answers, and she recorded all of them, and she began to see the shape of a world that was nothing like a resource, and nothing like a target, and nothing at all like what Cascade Acquisitions and Survey Service had called RV0041G in their operational briefings. At 2 in the morning, Vol disappeared. She heard nothing, saw nothing, discovered it when she went to check the weapons storage, and found it open, and 1 rifle missing, and went through the camp in the dark, with her light low, and found him gone. Halls was awake 2 seconds after she woke him. "He took a rifle," she said. Hall's face went through several things in rapid succession. He grabbed his comm. "Vol, report." "Nothing." "Samir, come in." "Static." "He's in the forest." Mira was already pulling on her jacket. "If he fires." "I know what happens if he fires." "Do you?" He looked at her. The shimmer was very strong on him now. 7 creature shapes moving behind his eyes, pressing at the surface, patient and waiting. She wondered how he was still himself. She suspected it was will. The particular, inflexible will of a man who had spent 53 years being exactly who he intended to be and did not know any other mode. "I'll find him," Hall said. "You'll find him faster with me. I have the scanner." He didn't argue. The forest at night was a different place. The crystal stalks glowed, a soft, cold internal light, blue-white and shifting, that lit the forest floor in patterns that changed as they walked, like walking through a cathedral that was also a living thing. The moss fur ground was cool against her boots. Things moved in the high canopy with a slow deliberateness that made her think of deep-sea creatures, unhurried, accustomed to their own domain, aware of the intruders, but not particularly concerned. The scanner pulled Vol's biosign from 800 meters away, northeast, the same direction that had a river bend. They found him at the water. He was sitting on a rock at the river's edge, with the rifle across his knees, and something, a creature Mira hadn't catalogued, long and low and scaled, with fins that were almost hands, lying in the shallows at his feet. His face was Vol's face, but it was doing something she hadn't seen on Vol's face before. It was still. Vol was never still. Vol was a man in constant low-level assessment, always calculating exits and advantages and angles. The stillness was the first sign. She approached slowly, scanner out, reading the discharge residue as she moved. Fresh, recent. The transfer was in progress. "Samir," she said. His eyes turned to her. They were halfway between. "I heard it," he said. His voice was his, still his. She felt a spike of desperate hope. "What did you hear?" "In my sleep." He looked down at the creature in the water. "Something calling. I thought it was." He stopped. "I don't know what I thought it was. I had to come." "You fired." "It was in the water. I thought it was." He stopped again. "I don't know what I thought." She crouched at the water's edge and looked at the creature. It was still moving. The shot had struck it along the dorsal line. Not fatal, not immediately. It lay in the shallows, with its fin hands splayed on the river bottom, and its scaled body making small, steady movements, its eyes open and finding hers with an expression that was not what she expected. Not pain, not fear, but something that looked, impossibly, like patience. "Samir," she said, "look at what you shot." "I see it." "No, look at it, not as a target, as what it actually is." She kept her voice quiet. "Tell me what you see." He was quiet for a long time. The river moved around the creature's body with a copper gleam. The crystal stalks lit the bank in that shifting blue-white glow. "It's old," he said finally. "It looks old, not sick, like it's been here for a long time." "Yes." It's the hands. He meant the fins, there, articulated, like they used to be something else, or they're on their way to being something else. Yeah. A long pause. I didn't. He stopped. The halfway quality in his eyes deepened. She watched him working to stay on his side of some border she couldn't see. Mira, I need you to tell me something real. All right. Is Reese still in there? Yes, I believe so. Is he suffering? She thought about the face in the crystal-lit dark, the patience in it, the depth. I don't think so, she said. I think he's somewhere new. I think the planet is showing him something. I think if we can figure out how to demonstrate understanding, real understanding, not just compliance, the mechanism will release them. How do you demonstrate understanding to a planet? I'm working on that. Vol looked at the creature in the water. He reached down, slowly, no sudden movements, the instinct of someone who had spent his adult life in environments where sudden movements get people killed, and touched the water near it. The creature's fin hand moved, touched his wrist. Vol went very still. It's warm, he said. I know. I thought scaled things were cold. Not here. He kept his hand in the water beside the creature for what felt like a very long time. The shimmer rose from the water around them. She could see it, the discharge, but different this time. Not a clean transfer. Something more complicated. The creature's form wavering over Vol's and his wavering back. A conversation in light. Two shapes negotiating the same space. Then the creature moved, pushed itself from the shallows into deeper water, and was gone in 3 movements, quick and fluid, the wound on its back already closing. She saw it close, the cellular repair happening in real time, fast enough to see. Vol pulled his hand from the water. He looked at his palm, at the place where the fin hand had touched his wrist. Did that just, he said. Yes. He was quiet. Mira. His voice was different, not the halfway there quality of the others. Something that had been through the halfway place and, come back. I think I understand what you've been trying to tell us. She looked at him very carefully. His eyes were entirely his own. No shimmer. Clean baseline. Let's get back to camp, she said. When they got back, they found Emil Brandt standing at the edge of the camp light with his rifle, on the ground in front of him. He had put it down. He didn't know why, he said. He just put it down. He'd been going to go into the forest, but something in him had not wanted to go unarmed, and the feeling was strong enough that he had stopped and set the rifle down and stood there trying to understand the feeling. And that was where they found him. Where's Otto? Mira asked. Emil looked at her. His face was complicated. They found Otto in the forest at dawn, seated at the base of a crystal stalk, with his eyes open and the patient, deep quality of full transfer running through him. He had been there for hours. He was not distressed. He was, here Mira chose her words carefully in her recorder, integrated, participating in something she couldn't measure or map, but that felt, in the way fieldwork sometimes felt things before the data was in, like a conversation. Halls gathered the remaining crew, Carrick, Emil, Vol, and Mira, and they sat in the clearing around the dead fire in the gray morning, and Halsa said, "Tell me the rest of it, all of it." So she did. She told them about the feedback loop, about the evolutionary logic of a system that taught predators by forcing experience, about the cellular repair she had seen in the creature Vol had shot, evidence that the mechanism could be reversed, that the transfers were not one way, that the planet did not want extinction, but understanding. She told them about the 4 words Ree had managed to speak. She told them about Vol's experience at the water. She told them, I believe the mechanism requires the shooter to demonstrate genuine comprehension of what they did. Not guilt. The planet isn't interested in guilt. Comprehension. Understanding the thing, as what it actually was, not as a target. I believe that when that comprehension is real, the mechanism releases the person. How do we demonstrate that to something that isn't conscious? Carrick asked. He was the oldest of them, and his voice was the quietest. I think it is conscious, she said. Not in any way we have a framework for, but I think the shimmer, the discharge, is a form of perception. I think the planet registers the quality of attention we bring to what we've done. She looked at Hals. What I need, she said, is for each of you to go back to where the kill happened. Sit with it. Not with the rifle. Without the rifle. Without the purpose you came here with. Just sit with what happened there and let yourself understand it completely. That's not a scientific protocol, Carrick said. No, she agreed. It's not. Halls was quiet for a long time. She watched him. The shimmer around him was very dense. 7 creatures pressing at his surface, waiting. His face was tight, with the effort of remaining himself against that pressure. He said, "I'll go first." He went alone. She let him go alone because she understood that what needed to happen could not happen with an audience, and because she trusted, for the first time, that he would not bring a rifle. She waited with Carrick and Emil and Vol, and the morning stretched, and the crystal forest chimed softly in the light. 40 minutes later, Halls walked back into camp. His face was different, not unrecognizable. Still his face, still his eyes, still the commander's bearing, but something in it had come loose. In the way a tight thing comes loose, when the tension that was holding it becomes unnecessary. He sat down in his camp chair and put his hands on his knees and looked at the fire ring. Carrick said, "Well, there are 7 of them," Halls said. "Still there, the ones I shot. There? I don't know the word. Adjacent, present somewhere that's not exactly here." A pause. "They're not suffering. I think they're waiting." "Waiting for what?" Carrick asked. "For me to understand what I did." Another pause, longer. "I sat there for 40 minutes, trying to prove to an alien ecosystem that I'm capable of seeing a dead creature as something other than a thing killed." He looked at his hands. "I don't know if I succeeded, but I tried in a way I've never tried anything." "Did it?" Emil began. "Something changed," Hall said. "Toward the end. Something shifted. I felt the pressure differently. Less like something pressing against me from outside, and more like something settling." He looked up at Mira. "I think it's going to take time." "I think so too," she said. "How much time?" "I don't know. But I think," she paused, finding the words, "I think it's not about the duration. I think it's about the depth. The longer you stay with it, the more layers of it you can actually understand. But a moment of genuine comprehension is worth more than days of performance." "That is not a scientific framework," he said, and there was the edge of something in his voice. Not irritation, exactly older. "Recognition. No," she said again. He looked at the forest. "I've been on 14 expeditions," he said. 14 worlds. I know the names of maybe 3 species." He said this without affect. "Just information. I'm good at this job. I've been good at this job for 20 years. I know how to read terrain, and I know how to read weather, and I know how to lead men in an environment that wants to kill them." He paused. "I don't know how to do this." "You're doing it," she said. He looked at her. Something passed across his face that she filed in her recorder as evidence of shift in framework. She was careful not to feel too much satisfaction, because that would be unkind, and because she was not sure yet how the day would end. They went back to the forest in pairs. Carrick and Emil, then Vol alone to the river. She checked on Ree and Otto every hour. Still seated, still integrated, but Ree's face had begun to do something new. Small expressions cycling through it. Human and non-human in alternation, like a screen switching channels, like a negotiation in progress. At midday, Vol came back from the river and said, "It came back." She turned from the scanner. "What came back?" "The one I shot. It was at the river again this morning, same spot." He held out his wrist, where the fin hand had touched him. There was a faint mark there. Not a wound, not a scar, but a pattern in the skin, delicate and branching, like a frost fern, like something had left its signature. "It came back and it touched me again. The same place." She looked at the mark. Then she looked at his face. The shimmer around him was gone. Clean baseline. The creature form that had been overlaid on his biology since the first discharge had cleared, as completely and finally as smoke in a strong wind. "How do you feel?" she said. He thought about this with the seriousness it deserved. "Like something that was heavy got lighter," he said. "And also like I'm going to hear that water for a long time." At 2 in the afternoon, Ree came back. It happened in front of her. She was close enough to see every second of it. His face, which had been running the cycling expressions for hours, went very still. Then it ran through something that was not an expression at all, more like a weather system, like a storm passing through a landscape, multiple different emotional qualities in rapid succession, none of them fully articulated. Then his eyes cleared. Then he looked at her. "Vasquez," he said. Her name, her exact name, his exact voice. "Yes," she said, "I'm here. I was stopped." His hands moved to his face. "I was somewhere else. No, there was another stop. There was so much more of it than I thought. The planet. It's so much. There are systems here that have been." He stopped again, and the look on his face was the look of a man who has been given an experience that does not have adequate language. "I knew the name of the thing I shot," he said finally. "I knew everything about it, where it went in the morning, and where it slept, and what it was afraid of, and what it loved, and how old it was. It was 300 years old." He looked at his hands. "I killed a 300-year-old thing because I wasn't paying attention." She sat down beside him. "Yes," she said. "I couldn't." He looked up. "While I was in that state, I couldn't feel what I felt before. The thing Hells and I were talking about on the pod, about the score, about the placement, that whole frame of it. It just wasn't available. There was no version of the planet from inside the planet's skin where any of that made sense. I know. Is Otto? He's still in. I think soon." He nodded. He was quiet for a while, sitting in the amber light with his hands in his lap. Then he said, "The planet won't let them take anything back." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I know this. I understood it while I was there. The planet's mechanism is not punitive. It's not trying to prevent the killing, even. It's trying to ensure that what kills here understands what it does. That's the only thing it's optimizing for. Understanding." He paused. "But if you leave without the understanding, if the discharge is on you, and you take it off planet, I don't know what that does. The mechanism was designed for creatures that would stay, that would live with the consequences." She thought about the meridian in orbit above them, about Cascade acquisitions and survey service, about the expedition reports that would go into the database, RV0041G, fauna assessment, trophy viability, recommended for Category 3 commercial survey. She thought about what would happen to this world if that report went in. "I need to ask you something," she said. He looked at her. "You have more standing with Halls than I do. You always have. He respects you in a way he doesn't fully respect me, for reasons we both understand. I need you to use that standing." "To do what?" "To make him understand that the report cannot classify this as a viable commercial target. That what's here, the mechanism, the transfers, the ecology, none of it can withstand the kind of extraction Cass would authorize based on this survey, that we need to file a Category 1 preservation designation, or this entire world gets open to anyone with a rifle and a license." Ree was quiet for a long time. "Theo's had 14 expeditions," he said. "I know. He's built his career on this. I know. You're asking him to end it. I'm asking him to change it. There's a difference." She looked at the forest, the crystal light, the chiming of the stalks in the wind, the deep, soft carpet of moss fur ground. He understood something this morning. I saw it in his face. The question is whether he can let that understanding have weight. Otto came back at dusk. He walked out of the forest in the failing light and sat down at the camp table and put his face in his hands, and stayed that way for a long time. Emil sat beside him and didn't speak. When Otto lifted his face, it was wet. "There was a nest," he said. "The thing I shot. At the river. There was a nest." Emil put a hand on his shoulder. Neither of them spoke for a long time. After dark, they gathered in the full group. All 8 of them, including Mira. The first time in 2 days they had been in one place at one time. The fire was lit. The amber sky had gone to purple-black with its 3 moons. The crystal forest glowed blue-white at the edge of the clearing. Halls spoke last. He had the look of someone who had been doing difficult intellectual work for many hours. Not tired exactly, but reshaped by effort the way a material is reshaped by sustained pressure. He looked at each member of his crew in turn. He looked at Mira. "When we get back to the ship," he said, I'm filing a Category 1. Nobody said anything. Survey data goes in the record. Observations complete. All ecological findings attached. Category 1, Preservation Designation, which means CAS cannot authorize commercial activity here for a minimum of 50 years pending full biodiversity assessment. He paused. That designation ends this expedition. It ends any chance of a follow-up commercial contract. It also ends any question of what the company does with what we've learned. Theo, Samir Vol said, the contract penalty. I know the contract penalty. It's significant. I know what it is. Halls looked at him. It's significant, and I can absorb it, and I'm going to absorb it. And that's the end of the conversation about the contract penalty. Silence. I need to ask you, Mira said. Before we go back up, I need to ask everyone. They looked at her. The mark on Vol's wrist. She looked at each of them. I've scanned the group since this afternoon. Vol is clear. Ree is clear. I believe Emil and Otto are clear. Commander. She looked at Halls. I believe you're still carrying most of the transfer residue. 7 creatures. That's a significant energetic load. If we go back to the ship with that still on you, I don't know what happens. The mechanism was designed for this planet. I don't know how it behaves off-planet. Halls looked at her. What's the alternative? Stay, she said. 1 more day. Go back to each of the 7 sites. Take what time it needs. And if the mechanism doesn't release in 1 more day, then we reassess. But she stopped. I think you're close. I think this morning was most of it. He was quiet. The fire cracked. Somewhere in the crystal forest, something called. A sound like a chord played on glass, rising and falling in a pattern that felt almost familiar, the way a mathematical structure feels almost familiar when you encounter it in a new context. 1 more day, Halls said. In the morning, Mira went into the forest alone. She had no rifle. She had never had a rifle on any expedition in her professional life. She had her scanner and her recorder and her field kit, and she walked until she found a clearing she hadn't been in before. Smaller than the others, deep in the crystal growth, where the moss fir ground was dense and soft, and the light came down in prismatic fans from the lattice above. She sat down. She sat for a long time without her scanner, without her recorder, without the professional framework she carried everywhere, just present, in the way Ree had described being present from inside the planet's skin, letting the sounds and the smells and the texture of the ground come in without filtering them through the purpose she had brought here. Things moved at the edges of the clearing, not afraid of her, the dear equivalents. She saw them, recognizing the shimmering bioluminescence, stopped at the clearing's edge and looked at her with their wide, amber eyes, and then moved on. Something with 6 legs paused at the crystal line and considered her, and then was gone. A bird shape, or something structured like a bird, landed on a crystal stalk 10 meters away and made the glass cord sound once, and then was quiet. She did not try to name them. She did not try to catalog them. She just let them be what they were. After a while she became aware that the shimmer, the quality she had been seeing on the others since the first day, the ghost over of transferred creatures, was present around her too. Not because she had killed anything, but because she had been in proximity to so much death, had been documenting it, been present for every shot and every transfer, without once stopping it, had told herself that she was separate from it, because she hadn't fired. She had not fired. But she had been here. She sat with that for a long time. When she walked back to camp, Halls was already there. He looked, from a distance, like a man who had been set down, like something had been carrying him for a long time, and had finally put him down on solid ground, and walked away. The shimmer was gone. She had her scanner out before she reached him. Confirmed. Baseline biological signature. Clean. The 7 creature forms that had been pressing at his surface for 2 days had resolved, integrated, been understood, or released, or returned, depending on what word the planet would have chosen. He looked at her as she approached. They're gone, she said. I know. How do you know? I can feel where they were. He touched his chest briefly, like the negative space, the shape they left. She nodded. 7, he said. I can hold all 7 in my head right now. I know where each of them was when I found it. I know. He stopped. I know more than I want to know, actually. I know things that have no use. Things a hunter has no reason to know about the things he hunts. Maybe that's the point. He looked at the forest. At the morning light, amber and diffuse, coming through the crystal canopy. I've been doing this for 20 years, he said. I know. I don't know what I do now. She thought of Vol's mark on his wrist, branching, delicate, permanent, a signature from a 300-year-old planet. She thought of what Ree had said. The planet's mechanism was not punitive. It was not trying to prevent the killing. It was trying to ensure that what kills here understands what it does. You could start by writing the best Category 1 designation in CAS history, she said. One that's thorough enough and specific enough that it's very difficult to overturn. He looked at her. I could do that, he said. I know. She sat down at the camp table and opened her recorder and the 14 hours of filed observation data that she had been building since they landed, and she began to write. She wrote about the shimmer, about the feedback loop, about the cellular repair mechanism, about the creatures she had named. Not in the colonial convention of the caste designating system, but in the manner of something trying to be worthy of what it was naming. She wrote about the sheer equivalence in the 6-limbed river creatures, and the bird shapes in the crystal lattice, and the enormous slow-moving thing in the valley, below the ridge, that they had never reached, and she wrote about each of them as what they were, rather than what they were worth. She wrote, "This planet is a lesson. It does not intend to be. It is simply what it is. A system with consequences, a place where the physics of death include the requirement that death be understood. Humans are not the first predators to land here. The mechanism is too old, too elegant, too optimized. Somewhere in the deep evolutionary history of this world, something learned to kill, and the world learned to respond. And over millions of years, those two responses shaped each other into something that is. There is no scientific term, so I will use the imprecise one, merciful, in the specific sense of the word that means not the absence of consequence, but the presence of a path through it." She wrote, "The crew of the Cass Meridian came here as hunters. They leave as something else. I am not sure what. I am not sure there is a word for it yet. But I watched each of them sit with what they had done, in a place that did not let them avoid it, and I watched the world receive that sitting and return something. Not absolution, not clearance, not permission to have killed. Just information. Just the understanding that they had asked for, and not known they were asking for." She wrote, "I do not know if humans can learn this. I think some of us can. I think the ones who can are the ones who have not stopped being able to be surprised by the thing in the clearing that looks at them and does not run." She wrote, "The planet's name. The word for it in the language of whatever species would one day be wise enough to meet it without rifles. I don't know. I haven't earned that word yet, but I will come back to learn it. That is my recommendation, that we come back without weapons and sit in the clearing and let it teach us whatever it still has to teach." She saved the file. She looked up. Halse was standing at the edge of the camp, facing the crystal forest. His back was to her. His hands were in his jacket pockets. He was standing very still in a way that she recognized from 2 days of watching this forest teach things to people who had come here to take them, as the posture of a person paying attention. She left him there. She walked to the edge of the clearing, where the moss fur ground met the crystal line, and she sat down, and she waited. And the planet did what the planet always did. It continued, patient and vast and utterly indifferent to their understanding of it, generating its shimmer and its light and its chiming crystal sound, running its ancient elegant feedback loop in every corner of its enormous geography, teaching the lesson it had been teaching since long before anything on Earth had learned to stand upright and look at the stars and want. The deer equivalents came back. She watched them. They moved through the clearing in their unhurried way, their bioluminescence pulsing in slow waves, their amber eyes passing over her with the calm of creatures, who have been told something this visitor does not yet know. One of them stopped at the clearing's edge, 10 meters from her, and looked at her with one of those wide, amber eyes, direct and clean and entirely without fear. She looked back. For a moment, just a moment, she felt something that the scanner could not measure, a quality of being looked at, fully without judgment, a quality of being seen. Then the creature moved on. The forest closed behind it, and the morning was full of light. In orbit 48 hours later, Mira sat at the communications terminal on the Meridian and composed the expedition report. She was careful and precise. She used the correct terminology in every section where correct terminology existed. She filed the Category 1 designation with every supporting data attachment she had. 14 hours of scanner records, 36 hours of field observation logs, the complete transfer documentation, and a 40-page supplemental report on the mechanism and its implications that she titled. Because she was tired, and it was the only title that fit, What the Planet Does. At the end of the supplemental report, she wrote a single line that was not scientific, and that she knew the review board would flag and probably remove. She wrote, "The lesson is not about violence. The lesson is about attention. Pay attention to what you are doing, and to what you are doing it to. And you may find that the universe is trying with great patience to give you the information you need." Then she sent the report, and she went to the viewport, and she looked at the planet hanging below them in its bruised violet and amber, the copper sea, the dense fur of its northern hemisphere, the 3 low moons rising on the day side. Halls came and stood beside her. "Ready to go?" he said. "Almost," she said. She watched the planet for a while longer. Long enough to feel the shape of it, not its geography, not its resource value, not its scientific interest, just its weight. The weight of something very old that had been going about its business long before she arrived and would continue long after she left. "Now," she said, and the Meridian turned from the planet and built toward the transit point, and the planet shrank behind them the way everything shrinks with distance. Not smaller, exactly, but farther away, which is a different thing, and Mira Vasquez kept her eyes on it until the viewport curve took it from sight. She kept the window in her field recorder open for the whole transit, just in case she needed to remember how to look. The transit took 19 days. On the first day, nobody talked much. The Meridian was a working ship, functional, efficient, designed for the distances involved in survey work, and not for anything as complicated as what they were all carrying. Bunks in 2 rows, a common area that doubled as the mess and the briefing room, a small observation lounge with a viewport that faced aft, so you could watch where you've been instead of where you were going. Mira spent most of the first day in the observation lounge. She was reviewing her scanner data, the full detailed record she had been too busy to examine closely on the ground. And what it was showing her became, over the course of the day, more complex and more interesting than she had expected. The energetic residue from the transfer events was unlike anything in the xenobiological literature. Not because it was exotic, exactly, but because it was consistent, the same underlying pattern, appearing in every scan, every incident, every member of the crew. That consistency suggested what she had begun to suspect on the ground, that the mechanism was not random, not incidental, not a byproduct of some other biological function. It was engineered. Not engineered by any intelligence she could identify. The planet had no cities, no tools, no technology in any recognizable sense, but evolved, shaped over sufficient time and pressure into something that worked with the precision of a designed system. She wrote in her supplemental notes, "The distinction between designed and evolved systems collapses at sufficient timescale. Given enough time, any sufficiently coherent selective pressure produces results indistinguishable from intention. The mechanism behaves like a moral framework, but it is not a moral framework. It is an ecological one. The difference is not in the function but in the origin. A river carving a canyon does not intend the canyon. The canyon is the result anyway." On the second day, Ree found her in the lounge. He had a cup of coffee, and the slightly uncertain look of someone navigating territory they hadn't mapped yet. He was, she had noticed, different in ways she was still cataloging. Slower to speak, quicker to listen, with a new quality of attention in his face that hadn't been there before the transfer. He sat across from her and put his coffee down and looked at the viewport for a while before he said anything. "I keep waking up at 2 in the morning, he said. "That's probably normal," she said. "Your system went through something significant. I don't mind waking up. I mind what I do when I'm awake." He paused. "I go to the viewport. I just look at whatever's out there. Stars mostly. I've never," he stopped, recalibrated. "I've been on foreign survey ships. I've never once gone to the viewport at 2 in the morning to look at stars." She thought about what the planet had put into him. 300 years of an old, slow creature's experience of the Copper River and the crystal light and the patient rhythm of a world that moved at a different tempo than human time. "You might have that for a while," she said. "How long? I don't know. I'd like to do follow-up scans at intervals, 30 days, 60 days. I want to track the residue pattern as it integrates. You think something of it stays. I think all of it stays," she said. "Not as a transfer, as memory, as information you now have that you didn't have before." She looked at him. "The question I'm interested in is what you do with it." He was quiet for a moment, then. "I keep thinking about the name of the thing I killed. You know its name? In the sense that I know, I understood, while I was there, what it was, what it called itself, in whatever way those creatures have for calling themselves things. I can't reproduce it. My mouth can't make the sounds, but I know the concept of it. The sound it made at dawn when the light changed, the way it moved through the deep water, the specific weight of its body." He looked at his hands. "I'm trying to decide whether to put it in my formal report. Put it in. The company will read what they read. But the scientific record is what will matter in 50 years when someone is trying to understand why this place received a Category 1 designation and what the grounds were." She closed her scanner. "Put everything in your report that is true. That is the only rule that matters in the long run." He nodded. He drank his coffee. The viewport showed the long dark and stars, and nothing else. "Mira," he said, "before we landed, did you know this was going to happen?" She considered the question. "I knew something was going to happen," she said. "That's why I took the job, not this specific thing. But when the drone footage came back, there was something in the density of the life signatures. Something about the pattern. Ecosystems that complex, that stable, that old. They have structures you don't see in younger systems. Feedback mechanisms that have been tuned over deep time. I knew we were going into something that wasn't going to be passive. And you didn't." He stopped. "I tried to stop it. From the moment we landed, I tried." "I know you did." He stood. "I know you did. And we didn't listen. I'm saying I know that now." He picked up his cup. "I'm trying to say that I know that now." She looked at him. "I heard you," she said. On the 5th day, Halse called a crew meeting. He stood at the head of the mess table in his commander's posture. Straight, measured, contained. And he looked at the 6 men around the table and at Mira at the end, and he said, "I want to talk about the report." She had sent her draft supplemental the previous day. He had read it, evidently with some care. She could see the tablet on the table, in front of him with annotations. "The Category 1 is filed and processing," he said. "That's not in question. What I want to discuss is the broader documentation, the public record components, the parts that go into the Xenobiological Archive and the Interstellar Survey database." He put his hands flat on the table. "I want this to be thorough. I want it to be accurate. And I want it to include the transfer events in full detail." The room was quiet. "The reason I want that," he said, "is that this planet is going to be found again. Category 1 protects it for 50 years. That's not forever. 50 years from now, or 100 years from now, someone is going to land there. And when they do, I want there to be a record that says, this place has a mechanism that you need to understand before you fire a weapon. I want that record to be specific enough that it cannot be misread." Emil said, "Theo, if we put the transfer events in the archive, There's going to be scrutiny. I know. The company will want to know why we didn't report it in real time. Why we didn't call for extraction the moment Ree was affected. We'll tell them why. We'll tell them the mechanism required on-site resolution, and that evacuation during active transfer would have been medically contraindicated. Halls looked at him evenly, all of which is true. They'll also want to know about the hunting. This was Carrick, his voice as quiet as it always was. The archive report will document what we did. 14 kills, the circumstances. Yes, Hall said. The table was very quiet. I'm aware, Hall said, of what this costs professionally. I'm aware of what it means for the expedition record and for the CAS licensing review. I'm not asking anyone else to absorb that cost. I'll own the expedition decisions. That's my job. He looked around the table. What I am asking is whether any of you have objections to the record reflecting what actually happened. Silence, Vol said. No objections from me. Otto said nothing but shook his head. The Brandt brothers exchanged their half-sentence communication and arrived at a shared nod. Ree said, "Put it all in." Carrick looked at his hands for a long moment. Then, "I've been on 61 survey expeditions," he said. "This is the first one I'm going to write about in my personal log that isn't a trophy count." A pause. "Put it all in." Halse looked at Mira. "Your supplemental report," he said. "I want it included as a primary document, not an addendum." She looked at him. "All right," she said. "I added one thing to my annotations." He passed her the tablet. "The ending. I suggested a different ending." She looked at the annotation. It was in Halse's handwriting, the handwriting of a man who wrote rarely and carefully, each letter exactly placed. The annotation said, "The lesson is not about us." It was never about us. We were students who arrived uninvited, and it taught us anyway. That is not the lesson. The lesson is what we do now with what we were taught. We don't get credit for learning it. We only get to decide what we do next. She read it twice. She looked up at him across the table. "It's better than what I had," she said. "I had 19 days to think about it," he said. On the 7th day, she found the mark on her own wrist. She had been washing her hands in the small sink in the crew head, and she saw it when she went to dry them, faint, barely visible in the functional overhead light. But there when she held her wrist to the light, at the right angle, not the branching frostfern pattern Vol had, something different. A fine line pattern that looked, if she let herself see it, like the lattice structure of the crystal stalks. The lattice she had sat in the clearing beneath, the lattice she had let the light come through for one morning, without a purpose. She held her wrist to the light for a long time. She had not killed anything, but she had been there. She had witnessed. She had documented. And the planet, in its ancient and unhurried mechanism, had marked her as participant anyway. Not in the consequence, but in the event, she had been present. The planet had noticed. She thought about what that meant. She thought about what it meant that the mechanism applied to witnesses as well as actors. That presence in the moment of consequence was itself a form of participation. That there was no neutral position, no safe observation post, no professional distance that removed you from the moral weight of what happened in front of you. She thought about this for a very long time, standing in the small crew head with her wrist in the light. Then she went to her bunk and opened out her recorder and added a section to the supplemental report. The section was titled, "The Role of the Observer," she wrote. "I did not fire a weapon on RV-0041G. I did not kill any living thing. I documented what others did and attempted, with limited success, to prevent additional harm. I believed, for most of the expedition, that these facts placed me in a category separate from the hunters. That I was a witness rather than a participant. I was wrong. The planet's mechanism does not distinguish between the hand that holds the rifle and the hand that holds the scanner. It marks everyone who is present for the consequence. I have, on my wrist, the evidence of this. I do not know yet what it means for my practice or my understanding of my role in future survey work. I know only that it changes something in the framework I have been using, and that the change is correct, and that I will need to think for a long time about what field ecology means, when the field has its own position on the question of who is responsible. She saved the section. She lay back on her bunk and looked at the overhead of the ship and listened to the quiet mechanical hum of transit, and she thought about the planet hanging in its violet and amber below the departure arc of the meridian. She thought about the creatures she had named carefully, and about the creatures she hadn't named yet. She thought about the 300-year-old thing in the river that had come back to touch Vol's wrist. She thought, there are things alive on that planet that have been alive longer than any human institution. She thought, we almost put them in a CAS catalog under trophy viability, moderate. She thought about that for a long time. On the 12th day, she had a conversation with Marcus Ewan that she had not expected to have. He had been quiet for the whole transit. Not withdrawn, not hostile, just quiet in the deep and turned inward way that the full transfer left as its residue. He joined her in the lounge late one evening when she was making notes, and he sat down and looked at the viewport for a while before he said anything. I want to ask you something, he said, and I need you to be honest with me. All right, was the thing I became. He stopped. The deer equivalent, the first one I shot. Was it? Was I it? Or was it me? Inside my body when it happened. Was I the animal? Or was the animal me? Or, I don't know precisely, she said. Based on what Reed described, I think it's not either. Both. A superimposition that runs the same architecture through two different experiences simultaneously. She paused. I think you were yourself, and also you were it. That the mechanism doesn't replace, it adds, doubles, forces the coexistence until one of the layers understands the other. He was quiet for a long time. When I was in that state, he said, I knew how to find water. I knew where the grass tasted best on that hillside. I knew. He stopped. I knew my name before, the name my mother gave me, and I knew it was beautiful, the way a thing with no concept of naming knows that it is what it is completely. A long pause. I had never thought about my name that way before. She looked at him. This was Ewan, the man with the lucky rifle and the too loud laugh, the man who had fired first, who had shot the most beautiful thing she had ever seen, with the casual ease of someone who had done it many times before, without ever thinking about it very hard. He was not that man right now, or he was that man and also something else. The superimposition, she thought, doubled. Forces the coexistence. When we get back, he said, I'm going to leave Cass. She hadn't expected that. What will you do? He thought about it. I've been running resource extraction for 12 years. I know extraction. I know what the math looks like from the supply side. He turned from the viewport. I think I want to understand what it looks like from the other side. I don't know what that means yet, but I think Ree's right that it has to mean something. She nodded. I also, he said, want to learn the name of what I shot, the way Ree means, not the Cass species designation, what it actually was. I can give you the scanner data, she said, everything I recorded from the moment of first contact. It won't give you the name, but it'll give you everything I could measure of what the creature was. I'd like that, he said. She sent him the files that night. On the 19th day, the Meridian came out of transit, within sight of Kepler Station, and the familiar traffic of the established systems resolved on the navigation display, and the common room lights brightened from the low blue of transit. Running lights to the full white of arrival protocol, and someone put coffee on in the galley, and the crew began the mechanical process of return. Mira sat at the communications terminal and looked at the expedition report in its final form. 14,000 words of supplemental documentation, plus the raw data files, plus the Category 1 designation, plus the 6 individual crew reports that had been submitted and reviewed, plus Halsey's amended ending to her supplemental, which she had kept exactly as he had written it. She added one more thing. At the very end of the archive entry, after the species catalog stubs, after the grid coordinates, and the atmospheric data, and the surface, temperature readings, and the magnetic anomaly maps, she added a single unformatted line that the archive system would flag as non-standard, and that the review board would probably query, and that she would defend on the grounds that it was observationally accurate. The line said, "Whoever reads this document and is planning to visit RV0041, G, the planet is already aware of you. It has been aware of everything like you for longer than your species has had fire. It does not need your protection, and it does not need your weapons. It needs your attention. Come with your attention, without your weapons, and it will teach you something you cannot learn anywhere else. Come the other way, and it will teach you the same thing, and it will be less comfortable for everyone." She submitted the report. The station comms came alive with the routine noise of docking clearance and traffic coordination and the ordinary business of a human outpost doing human things. Halls came and stood behind her and read the last line over her shoulder. He said nothing for a moment. Then, "They'll query it, I know. I'll back you." She looked up at him. "I know," she said. Kepler Station came up on the approach vector, the familiar web of docking arms and habitat rings and signal masts. Humanity's confident architecture imposed on the dark, and the Meridian's approach systems cycled through their protocols, and somewhere behind them, 19 days distant, in the space between stars, a planet hung in its amber and violet, its copper sea moving in its slow tides, its crystal forest chiming, its creatures going about the patient business of lives that had been going on long before the ship arrived, and would continue long after it was gone. The mechanism ran, as it always had, in every corner of its enormous geography, patient, unhurried, fully itself, teaching the lesson to anyone willing to stop long enough to receive it. Waiting, with the vast equanimity of something that has been waiting since before waiting was a concept, for the ones who would come with their attention instead of their weapons, and sit in the clearing, and look back. The review board queried the final line within 6 hours of submission. The query was polite, as these things always were, a formal request for justification of non-standard observational language in an archival document. Mira composed the response at the docking berth, before she had even cleared customs, sitting in the Meridian's empty common room, with her jacket still on, and her field bag at her feet, and the station lights coming through the porthole in the blue-white of high-altitude orbital illumination. She wrote, "The line is observationally accurate in the following sense. The planet's ecological mechanism functions as a detection and response system of high sensitivity and long duration. The mechanism predates the arrival of any recorded survey team. It will postdate any future survey team. It was operating in optimal and continuous function before any member of our species had developed the capacity to stand in its clearings and name what they saw. In this specific empirical sense, the planet is in fact already aware of anything that approaches it, has been aware for longer than our species has existed, and does not need our institutions to mediate its responses. This is not metaphor. It is a description of what the scanner data shows. I am available for consultation on any specific technical queries arising from this characterization." She submitted the response. 3 hours later, the review board sent a follow-up query about the phrase, "willing to stop long enough to receive it." She was in the station cafeteria eating her first meal that wasn't expedition rations in 3 weeks when the notification came through. She read it. She drank her coffee. She thought about how to explain to a committee of academics who had never left the station ring that she was describing something she had watched happen to 6 people in real time. She thought about Halse standing at the edge of in the morning light with his hands in his jacket pockets, about Vol with his wrist in the copper water, about Rhee's voice breaking through for exactly 4 words, about Otto's face when he walked out of the crystal forest at dusk with everything he had brought into it, left behind somewhere in the trees. She wrote, "This phrase refers to the quality of attention required for the mechanism to complete its exchange cycle. The scanner data documents that the mechanism requires active presence, not passive proximity but genuine directed attention, to move through its complete arc of transfer and release. In every case where a crew member gave sustained, undefended attention to the site and the circumstances of the kill event. The mechanism resolved. In every case where attention was given strategically or partially, resolution was delayed. The phrase "willing to stop long enough to receive it" is the most precise language available to me for this quality, given that the standard xenobiological vocabulary does not include a term for sustained non-instrumental attention to a living system. If the review board would like me to propose a formal term for inclusion in the archive taxonomy, I am prepared to do so, she added. I would suggest integrative attention as a candidate, with the definition: observation conducted without instrumental purpose, allowing the observed system's own parameters to define the terms of the encounter. She submitted this also. The board did not respond for 4 days. When the response came, it was 3 sentences. It accepted her justification under the provision for ecologist's field notation. It accepted her proposed taxonomy addition pending peer review. It requested that she present the full transfer documentation at the next Interstellar Biodiversity Conference, currently scheduled 14 months away. She wrote, "Accepted." Then she sat in the cafeteria for another hour with her second cup of coffee and looked out the station viewport at the star field and thought about 14 months and about what she would say when she stood in front of the assembled xenobiologists of the Kepler corridor and tried to explain what she had seen. She thought about how to describe the shimmer, about how to put into scientific language the quality of the crystal forest in the morning, about how to stand at a podium and say, "A planet taught a group of hunters something they couldn't learn any other way, and the mechanism it used was as elegant and as old as anything we have ever encountered. And I watched it happen in real time. And what I want to tell you is that we need a new category for this. Not threat assessment, not trophy viability, not resource classification. Something that starts from the assumption that what we're landing on has been here longer than us and knows things we don't, and builds from there." She didn't know yet how to say that in a way that would be heard. She thought about the mark on her wrist, the lattice pattern, the planet's signature. She thought, "I'll figure it out." She pushed back her chair and picked up her field bag and walked through the docking ring toward the station proper, and the star field scrolled past the viewports as she walked, indifferent and enormous and full of things that had been running their own elegant mechanisms as long before anything like her arrived to observe them. And she walked through it, with her hands in her pockets, and her recorder in her jacket, and the mark on her wrist, catching the light at intervals. She moved, branching and fine, the crystal lattice of a world that had looked at her, and decided she was worth marking. She thought, "The next time I go, I'll go prepared to sit in the clearing for as long as it takes." She thought, "I will learn the word for what I saw." She thought, "I will bring back the name of every creature that was there, and I will say the names in the record, and I will say them in the right order, and that is what I can do. That is what I can do." The station corridors opened up into the transit hub, and the ordinary noise of human movement filled the space around her, and Mira Vasquez walked through it, the way she always walked through things, looking, recording, attending. And the mark on her wrist was there when she stopped at the transit board and checked the departure schedule for the next ship to the inner systems. She noted the departure time. She noted the gate number. She took out her recorder and opened a new file, and at the top of the file she typed, "Preliminary notes, return expedition proposal, RV 0041G." And then she started writing.